Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth in our series of 5 webinars, which we're running as part of the 10-week challenge to protect and connect with our shared environments in the Dublin Bay and Kerry UNESCO biospheres and beyond. So we do have some participants calling in from various locations this evening, not just those 2 places, which is very nice. And the title of the whole program is Our Natural Habitat. So it's all about taking a look at how we use the land and the coast and the ocean that we live on, and how we share that with other species and how we can do it in a more sustainable way. So the lineup this evening is fantastic. We have Richard Curtin from Clean Coasts, who's going to talk to us about marine plastics and about doing the 2-minute beach clean. They have their own challenge for doing beach cleanups. And we have Ellen Rothery from, I hope I pronounce your surname correctly, from the Buzz Club in the University of Sussex. And Ellen will talk to us about the importance of wet habitats for supporting hoverflies, those very underappreciated pollinators, and she'll teach us how to make a hoverfly lagoon. We will also possibly have some more video footage of insects created by the Kirkus Forest School children. So before we begin, I want to announce the next 2 tasks in our 10-week Biosphere Challenge. And so far we've been doing things like putting away the lawnmower and doing nothing and observing nature. We've been counting insects for citizen science schemes. We've been growing our own vegetables and composting with our communities. And the next 2 weeks, we have a 2-minute beach cleanup, of course. And we will have a task to create or explore a watery habitat. So for the beach cleanup challenge, I want you to imagine the difference that could be made if every single person, whenever they went to the beach, just spent 2 minutes of their time cleaning up litter from the beach and removing it from the habitat and where it can affect marine wildlife. We absolutely encourage community efforts, but of course, taking precautions so as not to spread COVID. And why not take some photographs and maybe even weigh the amount of litter that you have managed to pick up during your 2 minutes and share that with us in the Facebook group. The following week, week 8 of our 10-week challenge, you'll be tasked with creating or exploring a watery habitat. So ponds, fens, bogs, rivers, lakes, the ocean, streams, wet grassland, even large puddles, all of these will count. And of course, hoverfly lagoons, which we're going to talk about this evening, are a very simple way to provide a little wetland habitat in your garden, or I'm guessing on the balcony, but maybe Ellie can confirm that with us. She's nodding her head yes. And Laois County Council have a great video about the importance of water features in wildlife gardening. So I'm going to put that link in the chat in a moment. It's inspired by Juanita Brown, whose book we've been referring to in previous webinars. And you'll find a link to that in the Facebook group as well. And there are also some very passionate biodiversity gardening experts, such as Owen Kelly, who's here with us this evening, who are part of our Facebook group, and also fascinating and great at answering questions. So pop in there and ask him some questions. I imagine he has plenty of advice on how to start your own garden pond. So let's get going, and I'll invite Richard Curtin to share his slides and talk to us about the sea.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Nessa, and yeah, thanks, guys. I'm delighted to be speaking with you this evening. So I'm just my presentation is just literally, I'm going to talk about marine plastics in the oceans play in our everyday life, and basically some actions that people can do in their own local community to kind of help protect our oceans. There's going to be kind of interactive session to it as Nessa was saying. So like, it'll be fantastic if people can just, when I prompt them to kind of guess questions, they can just either, preferably if they can shout out the answer rather than trying to put it in the message box, because it'll be easier. So great, the presentation only take about 20 minutes. And yeah, if there's any questions at the end, we can, I'll chat through those. Okay, perfect. Clean Coast, we were established back in 2003, and basically my role is I'm the officer for the Dublin region, and what I do is I work with clean communities and try to empower them to make a positive impact on their local environment. But as I was saying, like, this presentation is going to look at kind of like just the marine environment at a kind of higher level, like a very brief overview, and then kind of link it all back in at a local level. So our work is very much involved in the SDG goal number 14, which is the aim of that goal is to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. But when we think of Ireland, when it comes to this particular goal, we have a massive responsibility, because sometimes we think Ireland, when it's just landmass, it's a small country, but it's actually the area that we have responsibility for is up to 10 times our landmass. And so we have a very critical role to play in protection of this kind of large territory as well. And that's why it's important to have very strong regulation and kind of policy around protection of our oceans. But when you kind of spread out the actual SDG goals and how kind of like the light below water and our oceans link into our everyday lives, they play a critical part in numerous other linking in with the other goals. So climate action, our oceans play a critical role in regulating our climate. They're a critical carbon sink and absorbing greenhouse gas emissions. They also, when it comes to affordable energy and clean energy, our offshore wind energy is something that Ireland is going to expand over the next 10 to 20 years, and there's going to be an important role in how to decarbonize our energy systems. Also, when it comes to tackling zero hunger, up to 3 billion people rely on our oceans for their main source of protein. When it comes to kind of clean water and sanitation, Clean Coast, one of our campaigns is called the 2-Minute Beach Clean campaign, and it highlights the importance of sewerage-treated litter, and I'll talk about that later. But globally, nearly 6 in 10 people don't have adequate access to safely managed sanitation facilities. Then obviously responsible consumption and production. I'm going to talk more about the impacts of plastics and how our consumption of plastics are having a damaging impact on our marine environment. And then life on land. It's estimated up to 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe is actually coming from the marine environment. So you can see that it's very much interconnected, and the oceans play a critical role in our everyday life. So the main thing I'm going to talk about today is marine litter. So the definition of marine litter from the European Commission perspective, marine litter consists of any items that are being deliberately discarded, unintentionally lost, or transported by the wind and rivers into our oceans and into our seas and beaches. But it's estimated that up to 10 million tons is ending up in our oceans each year, and that works out as a dump truck every minute. A dump truck of rubbish every minute entering our oceans. But sometimes we have to kind of back up to see where it all came from. So this particular image is from a 1955 ad in Life magazine, and it's all about celebrating the throwaway living. And within the article, it stated that the housewives would no longer have to spend so many hours in the washing up, that single-use items would be the way forward. So you can track back to that time that this whole disposable way of living and single-use items were starting to be pushed on society back in the 50s. But when you come to the issues of sources of marine litter, it comes from a number of different areas. So you can everything from recreation litter, which Clean Coast work with to tackling in relation to our beaches and coming up in our parks and that. But also it can be microbeads that end up in our showers, or sewage-related litter, which I'll talk about later. In transport and fishing, there are other sources of litter as well. And then in our cities as well, you'd see kind of things like items that are down in storm drains, like everything from cotton bud sticks to cigarette butts, and then obviously industry as well. So the sources of marine litter comes from numerous different areas. It's not just what we see on the beach and that. And then further to that is where it actually ends, where it is actually coming from. So once it gets into the marine environment, up to 15% of it is in the water column. That's just below the surface. The other 15% is actually on our coastline. That's the rubbish that we see, you know, with all the footage from our on the internet or the impacts of it. But the other 70% actually lands up is on our seabeds, and that's so interesting because like we get lots of these items called retro rubbish. So every time there's a storm surge or that, we get washed up with a lot of historical rubbish, and you get items maybe from the 60s, 70s, or plastic items. So it can really show how look these items are very long lasting in our oceans, and they're having that impact on the seabed. So obviously when we talk about the planet, obviously it is the pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, and up to 70% plus of our planet is covered by oceans. And unfortunately, there's marine litter is found everywhere, but it affects different species differently. So it's estimated that up to 1 million seabirds die each year, and about 100,000 marine animals due to the impacts of marine litter. Now there's constantly kind of research kind of changing in relation to that and updating that. But obviously different species are, as I was saying, affected differently. So things like the Fulmar seabird, that's a surface level feeder. And there was research in Ireland recently that up to 19% of the species that landed up on our coastline had found plastic ingested in its stomachs. So you can see that how the impacts it has. And then obviously back down to kind of climate change as well. When plastics end up in our marine environment, they're also having an impact on the carbon cycle as well. So normally when kind of like phytoplankton or zooplankton would die, they would float to the very bottom, or they would drop to the very bottom of the seabed, and the carbon within them would be stored. But what's happened when they get tiny plastic particles in them is they're actually floating to the top, and that is actually releasing carbon dioxide as well. So you can see the impacts marine plastics are actually having on the carbon cycle as well. So when you look at as well from an Irish perspective, this is kind of it's an artist's impression of all the kind of major rivers in Ireland. And we do a very much source to sea approach to tackling the issues of marine plastics. Like in Ireland, there's up to 70,000 plus waterways in Ireland, and there's over 3,000 water bodies. And these include everything from streams, rivers, and tributaries. But when we bring it back out to the actual consumption of plastics, around 40% of the plastics that we create or we use are single-use plastics, also known as SUP. And when it comes to actually marine litter, 70% of marine litter is actually made from plastics. So we can't really separate the two issues out. And 80% of marine litter actually comes from land-based activities. So we have this kind of term. It takes 5 minutes to create, 5 minutes to use, and can take up to 500 years to break up. And that's the thing. It is very much more so break up than break down, because when marine litter gets into the marine environment, it's not so much as breaking down, but it breaks up into microplastics and nanoplastics. And when those items break down further, that's when they start kind of getting into the marine food web. So the consumption of plastics, unfortunately, Ireland, we have the highest from Eurostats. We have the highest in the EU at 63 kilos of plastic per person every year. And you look at kind of like certain items. So things like coffee cups, we dispose about of 500,000 coffee cups, 500,000 coffee cups daily, and about 220,000 plastic bottles. And all these, as I was saying, going back to that kind of article about kind of like single-use items back in the 1950s and 60s, these things like coffee cups and water bottles, like it's only in the last maybe 20 years or so that these have been inserted into like Irish society, and you can see how much they're integrated into our lifestyles now. So when you look at the kind of global consumption, over half the plastic that we have produced has been produced since 2000, and it's forecast to be up to 600 million tons of plastic being made by 2030. But the one thing I would really like to kind of probably get across here, and I'll actually talk about it in a second. In relation to, there is kind of action in relation to the issues of kind of waste and plastic. So we had the waste action plan, which the government just introduced there last September, and that's going to bring in things like a deposit returns system as well, which is going to make a big difference on issues kind of are going to it'll make a big, it'll be fantastic in tackling some of the issues of single-use items like plastic bottles, cans, and that. And then obviously certain single-use items like cotton bud sticks, cutlery, and plates and stirrers, they're going to be actually banned as well. There's other aspects of the waste reduction bill as well. It's going to like standardize kind of bin collection, and also they're going to have like set up a waste oversight body to manage consumer rights as well. And there's going to be an educational awareness campaign around how to improve waste segregation, because like it's so interesting. You talk to people, a recycling bin or a general waste bin might be black in Sligo, and it could be green in Offaly, and it could be purple in another part of the country. So that obviously causes confusion. So kind of things like this, through education, through kind of like deposit returns, there is kind of positive things happening to kind of tackle consumption. And obviously that's the European EU also has the single-use plastic directive, which that has influenced the waste directive. That's going to that has already banned certain items for use in Ireland as well, or use across the EU. From a kind of global perspective, similar to we're coming up to the climate talks in November this year, and we're going to need something for plastics as well, because we need to kind of like a global agreement how to kind of reduce the consumptions of plastic, but also tackle how plastic is regulated and kind of treated, and the waste streams are dealt with. That'll have to happen on the global level if we're going to make a big impact on it. And then there's other kind of things that could possibly make a big impact. It would be like a tax on virgin plastic. So if there was a tax on virgin plastic, that would really incentivize recycling in that. And then other aspects could be like getting kind of product impact assessments. So like if there was a product impact assessment on certain items before they were sent out to market, things like just say microbeads in facial scrubs, if there had been an environmental product impact assessment on that item, like those particular items probably would not being sold in the market. So things like that will make a big impact. And it is important, I want to reiterate that, plastic is a wonderful substance, but it's not the substance, it's how we've used it is the issue. And that's what we need to kind of make changes in it concerning that. So I'm going to stop talking for a second, and I'm going to bring you guys into it. So we're going to do, it's kind of like the marine breakdown game. So I want to see so obviously if an apple landed on the beach, it would break down quite quickly between all the insects and birds and everyone else eating it. But I want to bring back to kind of plastic items. I want you to guess how long it possibly takes to break down the marine environment. So the first one is the plastic bottle, and there are your options. So it's either 600, 450, 200, 30 to 40, 1 to 5, and so on and so on. So if anyone wants to take a quick guess, we fly through these, so don't want to hold back.
Hi, this is Oisin. I think around 600, 450 years.
450, correct? Yeah, thanks, Oisin. Okay, next one. We'll just everyone will just anyone just guess out. You don't need to. Anyone want to guess on aluminium can? How long does it take to break down?
We have a 200. A guess for 200 in the chat box.
200, fantastic. Yeah, next one, cotton shirt. So is it 600, 30 to 40, 3 months, 2 months?
30 to 40.
30 to 40. Oh, unlucky. It's actually 2 to 5 months. The reason why cotton takes so quickly to break down is because it's natural. So it's any natural fibers. If you ever you leave a wet t-shirt out in the shed, when you come back to it in a couple of months, it's already starting to break down. Next one is that happened to me a couple of times. Next one is fishing line. So how long does fishing line take to break down?
600.
600, correct. Yeah, so obviously because it's a reinforced plastics, so that's why it takes so long to break. And the last one, fast food box for all the people who've left their snack box on beside the beach. Or
We've got 30 to 40. Two guesses for 30 to 40.
30 to 40.
in
It's
the
actually
chat.
it's 2 buds, but yeah, 'cause it's obviously naturally breaks down quickly, and the seagulls get their hands on it. Perfect. Cool, guys. So look, I'm literally just fight for the last couple of slides, and so just quickly about Clean Coast. As I was saying, our kind of main role is to kind of empower communities and individuals to make a positive impact on their local environment. And we were set up in 2004, and there's 13 staff across 7 locations, and I'm the officer for the Dublin region. We have around over 1,400 Clean Coast groups. So they're everything from community groups to individuals, to like scouts, to tidy towns groups, to sports club. And there's around pre-COVID around 22,000 volunteers engaged with the program. So as I was saying, they were all dotted around the close, and it is the Clean Coast family has comes from such a diverse background, and you meet like it's something that's quite inspiring. I seen footage of some of the Bull Island Action Group yesterday, and it is when you see the kind of work that volunteers do to go through to kind of protect our coast, it is fantastic. So that's our kind of main work, is our kind of working with community groups. But we also run a number of different campaigns. One of the campaigns that I was talking earlier was the Think Before You Flush campaign, which is in conjunction with Irish Water. And the main thing is to highlight sewage-related litter. And so there's this thing called the Dirty Dozen. So these are kind of like items that are unfortunately ending up in our wastewater treatment plants and in our sewage infrastructure and causing major harm. So it's everything from nappies to cotton bud sticks to sanitary products to cigarette butts. And the kind of common items that end up these are common items that unfortunately end up in our toilet. And like it's interesting, if you ever take a walk on the beach, especially in the Dublin region and certain areas, you might come across these lollipop sticks, but they're actually not. They're cotton bud sticks, and you can see the impact they have. And then so that was taken on Shelly Banks, which is beside Poolbeg in Dublin. And then this is wet wipes, unfortunately. So wet wipes, they're another scourge, and there'd be another product if it was a product impact assessment or environmental product impact assessment. They mightn't have went out to market, but they're having a big impact on our marine environment as well, because there's so many plastic fibers in them. So the main ethos of the campaign is like all these particular items, have a bin in your toilet, and put these in. Always put items like that into it. So the 3 P's rule always applies. Pee, poo, and paper are the only things that should end up in your toilet. And then the next thing is the kind of main campaign we're going to talk to you about is the 2-minute beach clean campaign. So obviously some people don't have the time to engage with, probably a community cleanup for 2 hours or 3 hours on once a month or every second week. But the 2-minute beach clean campaign is our micro volunteers and campaign. And it's very simple. The next time you're down at the beach, if you just spend 2 minutes picking up some litter, if you're on social media, you can take a picture of it and share it on social media with the hashtag 2-minute beach clean and just tag us in, and then just pop the litter in your nearest bin, and obviously sanitize your hands. We're going to be giving out packs as part of this, so you have to register the packs, and you'll be posted out a kind of 2-minute beach clean packs, which has the bag and gloves and all the kind of kit you need to do the cleanup. So obviously, with kind of beach cleans and 2-minute beach cleans and that, there's obviously the mental health benefits to it as well. So when you're doing these cleanups, you connect with others. Anytime I'm down doing cleanup or even do the 2-minute beach clean, you end up having conversations of people either wanting to get involved or even just want to have the chats. So it's a fantastic way of kind of connecting with others. Obviously, cleanups are good for the mind and body. There's so much research talking about this all walks, where you get very much getting engrossed or in your local environment. And when you're on a kind of cleanup, you're very mindful of your own surroundings. So you're not thinking about that email or that deadline you have. So it is a fantastic way to get stuck in the moment. And then obviously there is research that's showing that littered areas actually have a negative impact on one's mental health. So when you do cleanups and do your 2-minute beach clean, you're also having a positive impact, not just the environment, but you're also having a positive impact on your community's mental health as well. So it's a collective positivity. So how to get involved? Just register to get a pack. Just select when you're probably selecting locations, if you're not familiar with, maybe just check ties and stuff like that. You might want to spend longer than two minutes. There's no there's no strict criteria. You can spend 2 minutes, you can spend 25 minutes, you can spend etc. There's no strict criteria. The hashtag 2 Minute Beach Clean if you can. Other things you can help with us within Clean Coast is probably possibly promote our campaigns and learn more about the marine environment. We've lots of different campaigns on our website. And then possibly if you want to capture our beautiful coastline, you're on a photography competition. So if you have any nice shots of the last year, you're more than welcome to submit to our photography competition. All details are on the website. Perfect. So I'll just finish on this. This is from NASA. It's called the Perpetual Ocean, and it's from satellite footage from 2000. I think it was early mid-noughties or that. But I find it's 2005 actually, and it just shows the oceanic currents, and it's so interesting because sometimes with these kind of like global issues or kind of issues with marine plastics or even climate change and that, like when you see this, you see how beautiful our world is, but also how interconnected it is. So when you do those actions on a local level, where a beach clean, or you're not just having that local impact, but you're also preventing this rubbish to having a global impact. So all these kind of actions, no matter how small, have an impact. So yeah, that's me. We don't have time for the mix and match game. Sorry. So I'll stop sharing, and
I'll do one mix and match.
Okay, right. Okay, fair enough. You might enjoy this. Right, okay. So mix and match, right? Pretty straightforward. So what do these pictures describe? So it's a picture of a dog and a fish, and it's a dogfish, right? So you're up now, guys. What's the animal? Or what's the
Seahorse.
seahorse?
Yeah.
Well done, yeah. So the next one?
Jellyfish.
Jellyfish, yeah, correct.
Jellyfish, yeah.
Okay, next one.
Glass
Bottlenose
nose.
dolphin. Bottlenose dolphin.
Next one.
Sea lion.
Sea
Sea
lion.
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 Yeah. Next one.
Not blow shark.
Oh,
Blowfish.
Blow.
Wolf
Yeah.
shark. Bar's saying wolf
Blowfish.
shark.
Yeah, perfect. And this one. Go on. What's the place?
Hook Lighthouse.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Hook Lighthouse.
That's
fantastic.
brilliant.
Hook Lighthouse. Yeah.
Popeye.
Popeye.
Popeye. Yeah. We're nearly there. Famous character.
SpongeBob.
Yeah. What's his full name?
SpongeBob. SquarePants.
I'm joking. And what's this one?
Humpback whale.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. Nearly there. What's the name of this movie?
Jaws.
Brilliant. Yeah. And last but not least, can you name this place?
Belmullet.
Brilliant. Yeah. So guys, yeah, that's me. And look, if you have any questions, shout. And yeah, just my only kind of parting words of wisdom is just enjoy the coast. Like, we've some of the most stunning coastline in the world, and so I really advise you. And it's like, from an own personal perspective, it's like I'm an avid sea swimmer in that, and it's just like blue spaces and green spaces. We just are blessed in Ireland. And like I always do find, like, when you love it and you learn about it, and this is fantastic, this course Nessa is doing, is when you love it and you learn about it, you're more willing to protect it as well. So yeah, look, thank you very much, guys. And if you have any questions, I went over, so sorry.
Thanks so much, Richard. That was brilliant. And I wanted to thank you for the mental health benefits of being given this kind of startling but very important information about marine plastics in this sort of positive way, with clear actions that we can take, and in a group setting. I think that helps a lot for people to absorb it, because things like marine plastics and climate change tend to overwhelm me with eco-anxiety, which is why I focus on small things like insects. But it is really important to get that information out there in a way where we can actually do something. We do have a question in the chat here from Owen. We find a lot of green commercial fishing net material. Are there any plans to reduce this?
Yeah, so basically, fishing litter is a big issue, and I know the fish it is an issue, and I know there is this Fishing for Litter initiative run by BIM, and they're trying to kind of like encourage fishermen to, if when they're out getting their catches or when they're out at sea, if they come across any marine litter, to bring it back in. And it has been a very, very successful initiative as well. So it has been, it's kind of like working with the industry to kind of make that impact as well. So, but sometimes it mightn't even be, we could be work with Irish fishermen, but because there's so many kind of different international fisheries in Ireland's territory, it might not always be speaking to the right audience, if that makes sense. But BIM are doing work in relation to that.
And you're saying it is being successful with the fishermen?
Yeah, it's very successful. It's been a very successful. It's been a successful project as well. It has been a successful pilot. Obviously, like, it'd be fantastic if there was no litter and stuff like that. So it's like, like, we have to be realistic. We can't just like ban plastic. Like, plastic was created because, the reason how plastic was created was a replacement for ivory tusks in pianos, and that's how it was a competition to get a replacement for that. Wow. So like, it's just, as I was trying to say earlier on, it's just how we use it in that. And yeah, so like, fishing is a source of plastic, and working with industry to kind of reduce that is going to be really important in that. But like, it's important not to demonize industries as well, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we'll
I'll put the Fishing for Initiative. So sorry, the how to get the 200 beach cleans, it's in the chat, and then I'm going to put the Fishing for Litter initiative in there as well, that just to kind of give information about that.
It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my pronunciation tonight is not great. Perfect.
Thanks, Richard. We'll have more questions and answers at the end, but we'll move on now. We have a little interval act. I'm going to show you a video that I made with the Kirkus Forest School. It's not technically to do with water, but it is to do with the concept of our natural habitat, and how we tasked the children with learning about insects and then thinking about how we share our habitat with insects. What is the kind of overlap in terms of geography and resources and needs? And these are the kind of worlds that they imagined when we gave them that task. So I'll share the video now. Okay, well, maybe we'll try that later on when I figure out what's wrong with it. Ellen, would you like to go ahead and talk to us about hoverflies?
Yes, I can. All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk to you today. I'm going to talk to you, as Ness has already mentioned, about hoverfly lagoons as an option for creating a wet habitat. And she mentions you can do it in balconies, and yes, you can create them anywhere. And actually, it would be fascinating to know, if you do create one in a balcony or a rooftop, what turns up in it. My name's Ellie Rotheray, pronounced correctly, exactly as it looks like. I'm a lecturer at the University of Sussex, but I'm also a volunteer member of the Buzz Club. So the Buzz Club is a charity organization, and it's a citizen science organization where we ask members of the public to take part in one or more of our projects and create habitat for pollinating insects, but also learn more about them and about scientific experimentation in general. And one of the projects that I dreamed up was Hoverfly Lagoons. And so the name, I came up with the name to give a more positive impression of what this habitat actually is. So it gives the impression of a kind of attractive pool that hoverflies might kick back in and relax. But in reality, they are essentially just buckets of often quite strong smelling, decaying vegetation. Not all the time, but often they can be pretty smelly. But I think that name has done a lot for this habitat and the animals that live in this habitat as well. So what they are, they're artificial habitats. They're trying to recreate this. So these are actually beech trees on Sussex University campus. And in these forks, in the trunks here, are these wet pools that build up, rot holes in tree holes. And they're filled with leaves that fall off the tree and water, obviously. And actually in these ones, I just went out yesterday to take these pictures for this presentation today, and found larvae in there. These white things here are hoverfly larvae. These holes also develop in stumps like this one. This has actually been cut specifically to create a lagoon habitat in stump for a rare species of hoverfly in Scotland called the pine hoverfly. And this is a more natural occurring one that is developed naturally but in a cut stump. So it's also replacing these. And as well, any kind of ditch that's microbe rich, some standing water, that's what we're trying to create with the hoverfly lagoon. And these trees need to be a certain age to develop these rot holes, as well as the stump holes as well. And this is really what we're lacking, both in urban environments and in rural locations too. And certainly by the uptake of these insects, these animals, I think they probably are quite limited, because they do end up quite packed full of beasties. So this is a family-friendly project. I try and write it and present it in a style that would be attractive and understandable for children, but really it's for these are my children. But the main activity, which is more or less fishing for larvae and counting them, can be for any age. But I created these fact sheets that can aid children's understanding and to help families or anyone interested to learn more about this group. And more about their life cycle as well. And these are all free to have a look at and download from the Buzz Club website, project website as well, as are the methods. So it's insanely simple. It really is. All you need is a container which will retain water, and then something to put in it like cut grass or leaf litter, some kind of organic substrate that hasn't had chemicals sprayed over it ideally. Some sticks and obviously water. We also encourage people to pierce overflow holes in the side to prevent the water from overflowing over the top and then losing some larvae potentially. So we have, for the last 5 years, asked volunteers to make them out of these single-use plastic bottles. The reason why we've done this is because everybody has access to them, more or less. They're super cheap, and it standardizes the size. And it's also safe for children to make them using these plastic bottles. And they work extremely well in that they consistently attract hoverflies. However, having single-use plastic in our environment for any length of time, they will begin to decompose, and chemicals could be released into the water and into our gardens. So we're very much trying to move away from single-use plastic, and that's what we're asking this year actually, is to, we're asking our kind of, it's about 200 volunteers to help us come up with a more environmentally friendly alternative. You'll have heard from Richard as well. He'll be pro moving away from single-use plastic. What we've been telling our volunteers is that please replace them every month and then recycle the old lagoon as you would normally. But we would very much like to find an alternative that works as well as the single-use plastic milk bottle. And I created a website which is hoverflylagoons.co.uk to present some more information. There's blogs on there about my kind of experience with lagoons and more information and detail about various things. If you're interested, have a look on that website. But there I talk about the lagoon container, which is something that I'm promoting this year. And if you can see, there's a few examples of kind of containers like this ceramic pot, steel pot and glass jars and things, another ceramic pot down here, more durable plastic pots as well work very well. And this top right photo is actually from a volunteer who's managed to put a lagoon in a tree, which was particularly impressive. I'd love to know what turned up in that, especially because it's got this pupation tray underneath, which I'll tell you about just in a minute. So the reason why, obviously, they need to retain water is because the larval stage of some hoverflies, so not all. The super cool thing about hoverflies, by the way, is that the larval stages feed on a whole variety of things. So some species are predators, others feed on bulbs or feed on vegetation, but this particular group of hoverflies has an aquatic stage, which is illustrated here. This is actually the pine hoverfly, and this is its body. Here its head end with its mouth. And then here's its breathing tube. So it's got this rather unfortunate name, a rat-tailed maggot, and I'm doing everything I can to change the way people view these animals. So I try and not use that unless I'm amusing myself or speaking to the dipterist in London, who uses every negative, I think, word under the sun to describe flies and things. But I refer to them as long-tailed larvae. But they are fascinating in that this tube, they can extend telescopically. And I'm particularly fascinated and amazed at this. So this is the end of their breathing tube. And they have 8 feathery projections here. And through water surface tension, these hook onto the surface of the water to allow them to breathe while they're moving around in the rot hole, away from predators and feeding. And I just think this is super cool. And you can see, if you've got a lagoon where you can see the surface of the water, there's this very telltale dimple created by the breathing tube at the surface of the water, which without even looking in your lagoon, you immediately know that there's some larvae in there. So these animals filter feed microbes in lagoons or any kind of tree hole. They filter feed like, I like this analogy because I like the idea of this being a mini ocean, but they filter feed like baleen whales. So they're miniature baleen whales in these tiny little water bodies. So I mentioned the pupation tray. So if you're interested in the species inhabiting your lagoon, then you might want to consider using a pupation tray where you would collect the pupae and then identify the individuals, because it is very difficult to identify to species the larval stage. So when the larvae finishes feeding after 3 stages, it's big enough, like a caterpillar would be, to pupate. It doesn't want to be in the water anymore, so it exits the water and finds a crevice to pupate in. And that's what these trays are for, to capture the larvae, to encourage them through thigmokinesis to stop and pupate. And here is a larva that is just about to pupate. It's exited the lagoon and it's just about to pupate. And this one over here is one that has pupated. And at this stage, like a caterpillar, they no longer move. And it's at that point we ask the volunteers on the project to collect them up, pop them in a jar with a bit of tissue and netting so they can continue to respire, and then just watch them every day to then take a photo of the adult, and then they can identify it. Often volunteers, the likely species that turn up in lagoons are quite easy to identify once they're adults. And I will have just a little look at some of them. So far, we've had 7 species confirmed using hoverfly lagoons as part of the project, but there's about 20 or 30 species in the UK anyway that could turn up in a lagoon. This is Aristales pertinax, but we've also had Aristales tenax turn up in lagoons. This is Halophilus pendulus, so-called tiger hoverfly. It can often actually be associated with ponds as well as lagoons, the only group that is. Generally, ponds aren't adequate for hoverflies just because there isn't that microbe richness. Any aquatic plants will probably remove the sugars and so on that are provided that the microbes then feed on, and those populations boom, and it's what the hoverfly larvae need to feed on. But Halophilus pendulus is more likely to turn up around sort of rotting or decaying edges of a pond. And this is their typical egg-laying behavior on the undersides of leaves above lagoons, as opposed to Aristales, that they just seem to dump out their eggs, all 200 of them in a great mass, which is quite interesting. This is another species I just wanted to mention because it doesn't have this longer breathing tube. It can't extend its breathing tube, so it needs to stay near the surface of the lagoon, which is quite interesting because it hasn't really evolved to to be in a watery environment, hence its body structure. It's Cerita pipiens, but it's turned up in many lagoons right across the UK, and it seems to kind of go through populations, booms and busts, but it certainly makes use of a hoverfly lagoon. And then last year, I was super excited to find Ringia rostrata turn up in a lagoon for 2 reasons. First, well, 3 actually, because it was brand new to the lagoon, so another kind of species to add to our lagoons project list. But also because the larval and the pupal stage had never been described. It was theorized that they developed in association with badger sets, but otherwise nobody really knew where and how it developed. So it was amazing to be able to do that, and we did publish it in association with National Museums of Scotland. So that's a super cool finding. And also this species is one of the only hoverflies with a really long tongue. I couldn't find the photo. I've got this incredible photo somebody's taken that shows how long the Ringia's tongue is. It relatively long for the UK, of course, but it means that it feeds in flowers with deep corollas, like bumblebees may and other bees, and it opens up kind of the number of pollinators or organisms that we're creating habitat for here that will pollinate a whole different range of flowers in gardens and surrounding habitat. So it was a really nice finding. But our staple hoverfly is the ubiquitous Myothropa florea, which is this one, the so-called Batman hoverfly, because it looks like it's got a Batman symbol on its thorax, if you can see it. Possibly not the best image of it. Maybe, oh yeah, you can. Well, I can. So this is ubiquitous across the UK and probably Ireland. And it will turn up in anything. It's known to turn up in toilets. If you put a bucket outside with a couple of leaves in it, it's likely to turn up. It turns up everywhere. And what's super cool as well about it is that it overwinters at the larval stage. So if you have a lagoon in your garden, it will have larvae in it over winter as well. So all year round, you could be providing habitat for these important beasties. And it is stunning. As much as it is very common, it's stunning and it's huge, I think, anyway. And I could go on about it, but I know I'm going to run out of time, get a bit too excited talking about this stuff. I also won't have time to talk about our results really, but by all means ask me about it now or later, or look on the websites. So we've asked volunteers in the past to look at whether size is important and whether the content that we put in lagoons is important. But one result I just wanted to touch on, because it is, I think, super cool and pretty interesting and apt for this particular talk. I wanted my master students to attempt to answer the question whether lagoons would somehow have a beneficial effect on pollination. So the idea is that they are bringing in hoverflies to breed in, producing bucket loads of, quite literally, hoverflies over a season, and therefore pollinators to pollinate the local plants. I didn't have much hope, I have to say, but we did this. We ran this experiment in an existing strawberry farm in Rye in southeast England, and also in a field near us, the university on campus. And we literally just put lagoons beside plants in a sort of 1 meter squared area, and then we had patches without lagoons to compare with them without lagoons. And believe it or not, they had a beneficial effect. So the super cool thing about and useful thing about using strawberries as the flower for this is that it's not only kind of an open flower which attracts a whole range of insects. So this is a hoverfly that doesn't use lagoons at all, feeding on the flower, but there's a couple of Aristalis, another random hoverfly, beetle, bumblebee, honeybee. But you can see the flower here, I hope. And I don't know if you know anything very much about pollination or the flower structure, but each of these little yellow bits in the middle here are the stigmas of the female part of the flower. And typically, if you saw a sketch of a flower, you would just see one of these as the female ovule with a stigma on the top. And the stigma is the bit that needs to get the pollen in order for the flower to then pollinate and turn into the seed or the fruit. But each of these, with the strawberry flower, it's unusual because it's got hundreds of them all here. So all of these need to be pollinated with pollen. An insect needs to visit all of them, brush over all of them in order for that strawberry to turn out looking like a normal strawberry like this. So this is what you would expect of a nice symmetrical strawberry, and this is a nasty lumpy, yes, it is a, sorry, I noticed a comment come in. Yes, it is a thick-legged flower beetle. This is a nasty, knobbly strawberry that hasn't been pollinated properly. Also, I don't know if you knew this about the strawberry as well, but these seed-like seeds are actually fruits, and it's inside these is the seed. So this is, each of these seeds is actually a fruit, and it's this flesh that we think of when we eat the fruit. That's actually part of the stem that's grown up after the stigma's been pollinated. Anyway, we found this positive effect. We found that more symmetrical fruit and more numbers of fruit were produced in the areas where the lagoons were compared to the ones where they weren't. So lagoons, small water bodies, appear to have this positive effect on pollination. And this might be because it's drawing in hoverflies to the local area and they're visiting the flowers more. But it might also be because the lagoons themselves are drawing in insects for other reasons. For example, here, so this is a hoverfly that doesn't breed in lagoons. It's also a predator, but it's drinking, as are these wasps and these honeybees. They're all drinking from the lagoon. So it's probably a really valuable water source. There's also, if you sat at a lagoon, so I know observing nature, I think, is part of the challenge. Certainly, I would encourage it at any time anyway. Like meditation, honestly, it is very, very good for your sense of well-being, just going out and watching. But if you had a lagoon in your garden or balcony or whatever space you have, just going out to observe a lagoon after it's been out for maybe a week or two and rotted down a little bit, insects gather on the surface of lagoons just to mate seek. There are these tiny little flies called pitcherwing flies that show off to the ladies by throwing their wings around and doing little dances, and just all sorts of stuff that go on around the lagoons. And they maybe change the microclimate as well in some way that's attractive to wildlife. It's not just insects, birds will visit, and other animals as well. And I just wanted to include this image of a lagoon. So I put this very, very dry old log that had been on my log pile for a long, long time over a lagoon to stop a bird from coming in and it was taking all this lovely gungy stuff that there's one of the hoverflies and another one here. And it was taking it away for its nest. So I was trying to stop it from doing this. They love it for nests in spring, so it is an issue. And with that goes the larvae, of course. And while I don't want to deplete the bird's nest, they are made for hoverflies, so I kind of want to put them off a little bit. And I put these logs over, and within a week or two, they sprouted this amazing little mushroom garden, which I just thought was the sweetest thing. So they can create a really nice little area or habitat, both in terms of in terms of all sorts of things that they attract and create. And just like I say, observing them is fascinating for not just hoverflies, but also, of course, hoverflies. So the hoverflies will come in. This is another big batch of eggs that was stuffed in this tiny little pocket on one of the sticks that was sticking out of the lagoon. And they will lay their eggs. And if you're lucky enough to have a microscope, a dissection microscope, but even just a magnifying glass or something to have a closer look at those beasties, it's well worth it. And I invested in a microscope, which, by the way, if you do have children, I can tell you they will like to look at anything under the microscope, from fluff to hoverfly eggs. They'll love it, equal amounts. But these are 2 hoverfly eggs. It's just quite fascinating seeing them up close. And I actually managed to film a larva hatch out of one of the eggs as well using the microscope, which has to be the Hoverfly Lagoon's highlight of my year this year anyway. But in terms of, I'm almost finished. I think I'm probably running a little bit over, but I think this is actually the last slide. But just to finish on, so I said many different kinds of lagoons you can use. By far my favorite is the glass vase lagoon. So these glass vases are kind of, quite large glass vases. They don't need to be so big, but that makes them particularly cool because you can see right through into the lagoon. So it gives you a rubbish interpretation of how big it is, but it's reasonably big. But all these little white lines here are breathing tubes. So they're all the hoverfly larvae, and they're breathing tubes going all the way up to the surface. And it's super cool watching them. And it's not just them, there's little gnats and all sorts of things swimming around in the lagoon to watch. And you touch the surface of the lagoon as well, and they suck their breathing tubes back in because they think you're some kind of predator. And this is me shining a light into one in the middle of the night as well, which has quite a nice effect. And again, it's just really nice peeking into this little environment and having this little window to watch them move around. And then finally down here, something's in the way, so I can't quite see, but this is me going, so I really recommend you do night safaris. Because I mean, we think about them in foreign countries, right? Go out on a night safari, but it's really exciting in this end of the world as well, especially in terms of insects. So I've got quite obsessed with nocturnal pollinators and things at the moment, and any beastie visiting flowers at night. But anyway, if you go out and have a look at a lagoon, all the larvae come out as well because they're photosensitive. They don't want to be out in the light, so they move away from it. So often all you do see is the breathing tubes, unless they're in a sort of darker space. But at night they're not so bothered, obviously, so you see them moving around like they're photographed here. Okay, I think I have got too excited, haven't I? I've gone on too long, but that's me. And some people I wanted to put up just to thank on the Buzz Club and my master students who I couldn't have discovered all these things that we've discovered together without these people. So yeah, I welcome any questions anyone has.
That was amazing. I think I'm actually going to explode with excitement. I'm in my element here because obviously insects are my favorite thing on earth. But I was just reliving my childhood as well, because I just realized we had an accidental hoverfly lagoon in our garden. Barry, you might remember this. And we had rat-tailed maggots. And I think for me, the name rat-tailed maggot was a huge part of the appeal. Because of the looks on people's faces when you say it. So yeah, I think you should keep the name.
I enjoy saying it for those looks as well sometimes.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Have you heard? When I see the hoverflies buzzing around in your hoverflies are, why are they doing?
Oh, all I heard is I see hoverflies doing something. Why are they doing it?
I see hoverflies in my orchard and they're
yes.
just hovering. What is it that they're actually doing?
Oh, mate
they're
seeking.
Not feeding. So what are they doing?
Mate seeking, most likely. So many hoverflies like Epicerphus bultiatus and some Aerostalis will defend little territories, many territories, and they'll often chase lots of anything flying by, really. But that's what they'll be doing, is defending these little territories. Really fascinating to watch.
Can you tell us, or do you have a theory on why the species count has been limited to 7 so far when there are 20-something?
Well, yeah. So probably because of location and content. So I'd love to try and encourage, I'm possibly starting a partnership or collaboration with a land manager in London, and he's super keen to create lagoons and stumps of different tree species. So they often turn up in very specific tree species. As you'll know, insects are particular, have evolved with particular plants. And so we're creating them with cut grass and leaf litter, sometimes different species of leaf litter, and I've not yet determined whether different leaf litter will make a difference. But using different like sawdust or wood chips from different species of tree might encourage the other species. But it has to do with location as well. So I'd need, depending on where the different species actually, their distribution across the UK and Ireland would very much depend on whether they would even find a lagoon, even if it was appropriate. And different consistencies as well. So some species do prefer a much thicker consistency of lagoon, like Ringia rostrata is found in a really super thick lagoon, and often they'll rot down and become super watery, and it's difficult to keep on top of that, especially as somebody who's an enthusiast and isn't checking the lagoon all the time and making sure it's very consistent. So it'll be very much to do with the content and probably the consistency and location.
Interesting, thanks. Eleanor has asked, what's the best way to set up the lagoon in your garden?
You mean in terms of location? possibly. There's a couple of things within the garden. So you'd want it to be out of direct sunlight as much as possible. It could be partially in sunlight, but it can get too hot. And at which point we've actually watched mass exodus of they just all come out of the lagoon, and goodness knows what happens if they were to just disappear into the vegetation, where they would survive, eventually crawl to another watery environment. They can crawl really far. Aristoteles can crawl meters to find a place to pupate, and that has probably to do with the parasitoid that can find the pupae and inject eggs into it. So it's probably some way of avoiding being discovered by the parasitoid. I'm getting off topic again. So yeah, ideally under a bush or under a tree in partial sunlight. If it is not in a garden, if it's a balcony, the same thing. Ideally in sort of create a shade if there isn't a shade. Ideally, it just shouldn't get too hot. And the leaves, sort of ivy leaves, any kind of leaf hanging over it is always good, because of Halophilus, you'll have seen it laying eggs on the underside of leaves. So that's quite important. The other final thing I was just going to mention is that there are predators. So there's a predatory musset. It's a white, it looks very much like the rat-tailed maggot, but it doesn't have the breathing tube. And but its mouth part, so this is on the hoverflylagoons.co.uk website, and its mouth, so you could quite easily identify if you just referred to the website, and its mouth part is this sort of pointy black mouth part, and because it became they can be a fox in a hen house. Basically, they can destroy all living things. They've evolved to eat mosquito larvae actually, but they will destroy everything in a lagoon even after they've stopped feeding, strangely enough. So they'll kill everything and then obviously pupate, and so we tried to see if we could move the lagoons in such a way, or position them in such a way to put them off, and we put them at head height versus on the ground, and we found the ones at head height didn't have nearly as many of these musset predators as the ones on the ground. So if there is a possibility of raising them up, if it is in a garden, then raising them up would probably put the musset off, but it would depend if it would depend. I guess this is more if the musset turns up and becomes an issue, then you could think about moving the location.
And Owen asks, do any hoverfly larvae feed on slugs or snails?
No,
sadly not.
There could be. No, I don't think so. No.
Red soldier beetle larvae do, I believe, if that's any use to you, Owen. I put the Buzz Club website and the Hoverfly Lagoons Twitter account into the chat. I'm not sure if there are other social media links on Instagram or Facebook, or is it just Twitter?
We do have a Buzz Club Facebook page, but right. I think the Twitter would be, for Hoverfly Lagoons, the Twitter's the best. I'll just stick in the blog website as well, because that has a lot of the kind of more, I think, lots of information and interesting anecdotes.
Lovely. I bet there's some very interesting anecdotes when it comes to Hoverfly Lagoons. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
The poster that you showed in your slide, that's available as well, right? The steps to set it up?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. That's on the Buzz Club.
Oh, I should also take this moment to let everyone know that our next and final webinar will be on the 25th of August. Yeah, 25th of August. It's also a Wednesday, same time, 7 p.m. And the theme is Nature and Culture Connects. So we will have Celine Aswell, who's a community living expert and nonviolent communication facilitator. She'll be talking to us about how humans lost their trust in nature to meet our needs, and how we can regain it by connecting with ancestral nature knowledge. And we'll also have Sophie Griffin van Maltzen, who has designed award-winning multi-purpose parks and gardens, which meet both human needs and those of the species we share this land with, including St. Anne's Road Pocket Park in Drumcondra, if you want to visit that in the meantime. I've done several insect workshops there, and it's absolutely bursting with life. So we'll also mention foraging for food and the role of art in environmental activism. And we'll be checking in to see how our challenge participants have got on during the 10 weeks and how their wildflower pots are doing. So if anyone has managed to complete the wildflower pot challenge, we invite you to post a photograph on the Facebook group so that we can flaunt them in a sort of online wild plant pot pageant at the next webinar. So I'll put the link for that in the chat box now. And now I'm going to try and show you the Kirkus Forest School video again.
Hello, that is black and yellow. And it has a spike heel. A spike heel. You can just be squashed.
Oh no. Where does it live?
I need heel. This is the golden.
Take your bob today? Remember this is so does it grow its own grass?
Yes. I think it's like imaginary butterfly. What is this? Can you show me around the house? What are the features of the house? These are my other ones. One's a poisonous spider. I think it's like a poisoning bird. This is my watchtower. My watchtower for birds. Different kinds of bees. And then you can do that to the... That's my watchtower. No, here should be the watchtower, but why do you have a big loaf of mud here? Because that's my house. Your house is just a big bundle of mud. If you're gonna need to do some fixing up on that, then I'd say my house has got quite a lot of roads going to each other's places. They use their habitat. Here, one of these insects, that you can, I forgot what their name is, and this one here is a white butterfly that I can see at my house. It's quite delicate, but you would, since it's delicate, you wouldn't want to. And the butterfly, she was a doctor that cared for wounded people of the Navy. They're just they're quite old bugs, so they're sort of missed their chance for children. But they dedicated it to World War II. This is a little interesting too. So that's the gate and it opens and closes. And then this is our little boogie. And then this, our fire. And then these are our roofs that we pop when it's nighttime. And then this is how we get the sticks in, hammering. A little spiky insect and it moves around at night. Georgie. I found the spider. Ah, it's on the mallet. I'm gonna pop it in my hand. There's a spider on the mallet. I'm gonna catch it on my hand. No, I don't like. I make or just live in them. It eats them and it lives in them. Magpies and crows and blue tits, great tits. Sometimes like to eat them because they're very slow.
When your beetle is a baby, does it have a different type of habitat?
Then they live in mud, so it's for adults and babies. Daytime they like to sleep in the sun. So they hunt as well? So they're nocturnal animals. Very nice. Are they rare? Too much impact on their population? Yes, so it likes to hide in places with buttercups because its wings camouflage in. Ladybirds and one green caterpillar. Do you need more? And one green ladybird and two they eat only green stuff and sometimes very small green
All of them
bugs.
here.
It didn't have a house, but now it has a house. Now what can I do? I've missed the world. Right. Let's see. So I hammer them down and Harriet puts some mud around them to keep them stable.
What kind of insects and animals do you think will live in this forest?
I have no idea. Maybe beetles, mice? All sorts of bugs. I think you're quite right. I'm going to use a leaf. Harriet, could you some mud here? Okay. This one is definitely not. Animals that stay out on a day and night. Do you know their names? This one's Peppa, and this little one is George. Lovely. And then this little one I made a narwhal, but it looks like a narwhal, but it's not.
And what sort of habitat does your insect live in?
A home of flowers. So the insects can walk on the road to house. But sometimes the road's very loud. How about this when everyone's busy going out to work?
And they get busy, do they?
They keep honking their horns and blowing their whistles.
They have whistles. Wow.
Yeah.
And is the construction of the road, what can you tell me about the decisions you made in
It's kind of
constructing
like
the road?
confusion and
Like human roads. What would they So there you have it. That's how kids see us sharing habitat with insects, and I think it reflects a lot of the challenging aspects about our environment. Maybe the kids are sort of picking up, like the busy roads that cause, what did he say, confusion and delay. And the defensive watchtowers and things like that, but also the ability to adapt our environment to support us and other species if we choose to, by growing our own food and planning towns that connect us with our neighbors and so forth. And I also get a really strong sense of the personal connection that the kids have with nature, where they know they've given names to the insects, and you can kind of sense a real fondness and care when they're talking about the insects that they've named. That's why I think it's so important for kids to learn, and adults to learn, the names of the plants and animals that we share the world with, such as rat-tailed maggots. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I see there's a great conversation going on about identifying hoverflies and useful books for that. So I'll share some of those resources in the Facebook group as well. And does anyone have any last minute questions? We have a few minutes left.
There is a question that I just haven't typed the answer. I was about to. I thought I might as well just say it. Owen's asked what eats adult hoverflies. And I was going to say not very much, because they're super fast, and they've evolved to get super fast. But they will be eaten by things like robber flies if they manage to get a hold of them quickly enough. Also birds, again, if they manage to get them fast enough. As hoverflies age as well, they'll be eaten by anything that can get them. And if they get in a web, they'll be eaten by spiders.
How effective is their disguise, their black and orange stripes, at deterring predators, do you think? Is there any way of knowing?
I think it's quite fascinating, that, because it's whether, so are they colored like that because they're trying to tell a predator that they're distasteful or that they'll sting, or are they telling the predator that they're super fast, so there's no point in going for me because I'm going to fly off way too quick and it's a waste of energy. I don't know which is true, and maybe both are true for different species. Yeah, I mean, some of them just have the most incredible mimicry, and I get so that's the other thing I get super excited about is insects that try and mimic things like leaves and twigs. and they look so like some wasps and bees, some hoverflies. So it's immense. And they've become so good at it that you and I, humans, can really struggle to see the difference between them. So it has to be to do with mimicking something that's distasteful or just not food for some animals, I guess. So I think it's super impressive.
The question is, can hoverflies be like predator, like insects?
Yes, well, the larval stage. So the larval stage of many hoverfly species are predators of aphids. Is that what you mean? Or the adults?
The adults.
The adults. So all adults feed on pollen or nectar, pollen and nectar. None of them feed on it. They all have the same requirements at the adult stage. But it's the larval stage that's most diverse in terms of its feeding requirements.
Thanks.
I'll give you another reminder of our next two tasks in the challenge, which are to do the 2-minute beach cleanup. And you can contact Clean Coasts for your beach cleanup pack to do that, and to create or explore a watery habitat. So the Buzz Club website provides all the information you need to know how to make a hoverfly lagoon, which is what we've been talking about this evening. Obviously, if you've got this far in watching it, you will know that. So that should give you plenty to keep you busy for the next 2 weeks. And then on the 25th of August, we have another webinar all about how culture and creativity interact with nature, human culture and creativity, I should say, because animals and plants can be very creative in their own ways too. So I'd like to thank our wonderful speakers, Ellen Rotheray and Richard Curtin, and all of you lovely participants for joining us this evening. And see you again soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Bye.